you've been driving around town, you've probably noticed a lot of trees without canopy. This is a really good indicator that your tree was injured during the winter storm, followed by some of these down here. If you follow this arrow down here, I have some of these epicormic sprouts. That's what we call them in the arboriculture world. But this is always a really, really good sign that the tree has been damaged. It could be winter damage, it could be insect damage, it could be fungal problem. But in this instance, what we have here is new growth. And if you kind of want to think about it as frostbite, as the frostbite moves down your hand and your fingers into the core of your hand, this is what we've seen in a lot of our trees in Plano. And over here on the right, I kind of wanted to talk about pre-existing conditions, because some of these pre-existing conditions can exacerbate some of the issues we have in trees. Not only is the tree dead above here, but we have some cavities here in the tree. And this just adds to the safety concerns that we have for a lot of these trees on residential properties, public properties throughout Plano. Here's another example of a tree, a pre-existing condition. This tree here is sitting in the right-of-way. This tree is probably too big for this right-of-way. We would recommend a smaller tree. But there are a lot of targets underneath these trees. These are also safety concerns that we have. This truck that's parked under the tree, the infrastructure that we have, our roads, our sidewalks. These are all things that we have major concerns over as trees start dropping limbs from the winter storm. Over here on the right, I've got some more pictures of these epicormic sprouts. Typically, you would get new growth from buds that are on the tips of branches. But when you have a severe storm like this, with all the cold weather, there are dormant buds on the trees that come out. These typically are very weak attachments, and they come in bunches. So you can look at here and you can see that we have 2, 3, or 4 branches all in the same area. As these branches get bigger and older, they're going to start growing into each other. And these will be a safety issue. These will need to become an arborist will need to come in here and selectively prune. These will need to be removed completely, but above in the tree canopy, we'll have to remove a lot of those new growth epicormic sprouts. Here's another example of a tree in our park system that we addressed, but this is another tree that was damaged during the storm. And I kind of wanted to bring this to everyone's attention, because a lot of people look at trees and they say, hey, this tree's healthy. It looks really good. When in fact, these trees have structural issues. And we call this an included branch bark attachment. But for today, we'll call it a V branch shape. And if you look at the picture on the right where I've added the red lines, there's a crease down here. This is a very weak attachment. Water will collect in this area here, and over time it will rot. And so this was brought to our attention by a forester in our department. And we have targets, we have a pavilion here, we have a trash can. We know this is a high traffic area. And so as an arborist, these are things that I look at when I look for safety concerns for our trees and for our citizens in our parks. And so this, topped with the damage from the winter storm with brittle branches that can fall down, just become a hazard. This is another example of a tree in an HOA. It's in the right-of-way. This tree's outgrown the space, and it also has a really big V shape right down here. And this will be a failure point on the tree as the tree starts to lose its leaves. And so I wanted to show this picture just to show you what a good branch attachment looks like. This is the opposite of a V. This is more of a mountain shape. So, if you're looking at your tree at your house and you want to know if you have good or bad branch attachments, this is always a really great indicator that you have a good branch attachment. Some other symptoms I've seen on trees, and this is over at City Hall. We'll go to the picture on the right first. This is called slothing, and it's where the bark and the cambium layer comes completely off the tree. This tree was completely dead, and it was a safety hazard in the parking lot, and we removed these trees when we found them. But there are some other trees like this, and these are vertical frost cracks. Now, this typically happens on trees that have really thin bark. And so this is a lace bark elm. We've seen a lot of damage to lace bark elm all throughout Plano. Other trees that have really thin bark are maple trees, and we've seen some damage on those. But most of the frost cracking we've seen has been on lace bark. And we've seen some bark peeling as well, not quite as severe as the actual bark here. But we are concerned that some of these trees might not make the summer when we start getting into the 100-degree days of August and September. Moving on to the next slide. Oops, I'll go back. And these are other pre-existing conditions outside of the bad branch attachments. When a tree gets stressed, it attracts insects. And so this tree here, we're showing signs of stress, and it's probably because of its location really close to the sidewalk. It has a limited root system. And so whenever you have insects are vectors. They carry fungus, they carry bacteria. And once that gets into the tree, it starts decaying the tree. And another example of a tree that you might think is a very safe tree actually has some safety issues. We have two competing branches here. We have that V shape that I talked about. So this area right here is a weak point. And when you combine that with the winter storm damage and insect damage, it can become an issue on homeowners' properties. And so I wanted to show an example of trees that can be saved. I don't want this to be all gloom and doom, because I do think that some of our trees are going to recover. Renee, my supervisor, suggested I do this. And if you kind of take your hand and you make a circle with it and put it over your eye and look at the tree, and you can kind of see the resemblances of a tree, then it's very possible that we can save these trees. We want to save trees that have been on properties, but we also have to balance that with safety concerns. And that's what we want to do, is we want to protect the citizens, their pets, their neighbors. We want to protect their homes and, of course, our infrastructure that is all around here. But a reduction pruning is a pruning where you remove the dead material out of the tree. And the reason that's so important is that as we get these as we get some of these thunderstorms in the fall, these lower portion of the tree, they catch the wind, they move around, and these branches can fall off. And these aren't as big, but they, if they fall down, they can break a windshield, they can hurt you. And we want to make sure that the citizens are aware of these issues. So let's go ahead and talk about hiring arborists. Now, this is probably the most important part of the topic today. Tree care is not regulated in Texas, and anyone with a chainsaw can come by your house and offer to cut down your tree. And honestly, if it's my tree, I'm going to look for someone who gives me the cheapest cost to take down my tree. But sometimes that's not always the best decision. So we'll talk about a few things real quick. About insurance, are you insured? These are questions that we're going to want to ask the contractors that come out to our homes. Do you have an ISA certification? Are you going to be roping down limbs? If your tree's real big, you're going to want to have your limbs roped down. How are you going to protect everything I have on my property, my sprinkler system, my home, my neighbor's home, if your tree is hanging over their house? And then can you explain to me the tree removal process? So are you insured? Not all landscapers are going to have this insurance. If something happens on a property, the homeowner can be liable for insurance. So we want to make sure, and this is extremely important, we want to make sure that the tree care company has workers' comp insurance. Landscape insurance, they may or may not have that. The workers' comp insurance will protect the homeowner in case there is an accident on the property. And you can go to this website here. You can look to verify that the company has the insurance that you're looking for, or you can ask the contractor to produce their document. ISA certification, that is a certification that arborists have, such as myself. I was going to blur this out here because it shows my expiration. I can assure you that mine is up to date. I'm just waiting for it in the mail. But certified arborists have a higher level of knowledge and skills to properly care for trees. There's a reason that there's an expiration date. We have to recertify every 3 years. We get 30 hours of continuing education credits. And we learn the new best management practices. So arborists that have ISA certifications are highly recommended, but it's not as important as being insured. Roping down limbs, of course, we want to make sure that the contractors on big trees are doing this. And so you want to ask them how they're going to do it, if they're going to do it, because we want to protect our neighbors, we want to protect our home, our infrastructure, our streets from damage. Another thing you can do is, ask them, how are you going to do it? Are you going to put up protection zones on your property? Are you going to flag? A good thing you could do is make sure they flag your irrigation, your sprinkler heads. If they're going to bring big equipment on your property, you're going to want them to flag any kind of irrigation holes or irrigation flags, especially when they're bringing their grinder to grind the stump. And these are just little things that will help you protect your property. And then, you want to just ask them in general, make sure they have a plan. The whole reason behind asking this question is that they're just not, a door-to-door salesman that's coming out here to make a quick buck. I get it. People have a lot of trees and there's a lot of opportunity to make money taking down trees. And we just want to protect our citizens. I have this link here, but I won't play this, but basically this video shows someone on a ladder. It's a homeowner, and he cuts down a branch, and there's a woman with a baby holding a rope on her property, and the branch comes down and knocks him down off the ladder. Now, he wasn't injured, but again, the first comment that person had was hire tree care professionals, and I cannot enforce this enough. So I'll get into the frequently asked questions. I only have 2 or 3 on here. The rest of them, like I said, are posted on the website. These are trees that over at our event center, we lost a lot of trees over here. We had to remove them, but we will be replacing them with a future project. But the general consensus among arborists right now is to wait until the end of summer. We had the big winter snap, and we went through 2 months of extended rain. And now we're going to be going through a period of more of our summer droughts and high temperatures. So that's why we're kind of saying, let's wait, let's give these trees a time to recover. In general, if your tree has more than 60% of its canopy, more than likely this tree can be saved. It's the trees that have a lot of growth at the trunk of the tree that are going to be an issue. And some trees have pushed out new growth, and I have seen quite a few trees recover better than a lot of the arborists and I have talked about. We've been meeting on the side monthly, discussing the winter damage in our areas, and this is basically the general consensus. But if you haven't seen any growth on your trees, we highly recommend that you take your trees down and that you find a reputable arborist. Why do you have to remove your tree? I've kind of gone over this, but here's a picture of a tree that was already dead, been dead for a while. As trees age, they will get brittle. If they're already dead and they're aging, some trees are better at it than other trees. Ash trees are actually not really good at this. They tend to fall apart as they're dead. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting everybody against safety, safety, safety. Where can I stack the wood that has been cut? For the most part in Plano, if you have an alleyway, you want to put brush and dead wood material in the back. But what we want to make sure, and we highly recommend, is that when you negotiate the contractor removing your material, you want to make sure that they include removing all of the debris. There's a limited amount of debris that the city will remove. After that, it becomes bulk. And you can look at this website here to see what the policies are on that. And so that goes everything. I'm happy to answer questions anytime you have a question on trees. I love trees.